Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Actually, this reminds me of hey, go ahead. That reminds me of a very special experience I had back in 1969 or 70 in San Francisco. And I think it was at the Fillmore West. It's one of those big ballrooms where all the famous bands played. And so we went there, the ragtag Hare Krishna marching band. Kind of like, I guess, the Transcendental Sergeant Pepper or something. And so the people there, I guess people that were managing, it was a big concert, big names, and so they invited us to come and chant on stage. I was just about, I guess, 20, 21 years old. And we did chant, and thousands of people were very ecstatically chanting, and it was really a unique experience. It was sort of so this, of course, this is a little bit smaller gathering, but I think it's the same spirit.
Nice.
And perhaps one thing I'll say, I think if somehow or other, and then I'll talk about kirtan. As long as Veda keeps paying, I'll keep talking. So, for me, it was divine providence that I happened to go to Berkeley. I started at UCLA when I was a kid. I was 17 years old, and then for various reasons, sort of romantic, I transferred to Berkeley in January of 1967, and it was, it's hard to describe what Berkeley was like then. I first went up to check out the campus. I flew from LA up to Oakland, and there was something in the air. You could, how shall I put it? You could practically feel history changing before your eyes. You could actually see the world changing. There was an energy there, to use a sort of cliche. And I've always thought that it was Krishna, God's arrangement, that I experienced that. In fact, there's a picture of me and my older brother on the front page of the Oakland Tribune in the middle of a big riot trying to stop, troops from going to Vietnam. And so we were in the middle of all that stuff, and because although I went on to study spiritual philosophy and to understand that to really change the world, because if it's just mundane, it's a very well-known fact in history that today's liberator is tomorrow's tyrant. And there are basically unlimited examples of that in history. So, but to see the world changing before your eyes, and that inspired me. And so now, as I've told Veda, I think that Krishna consciousness, which we'll try to explain to you and try to make it sound reasonable. Krishna consciousness is really an attempt to spiritually transform the world. And I know it's like those books they used to have for kids, like What Makes Johnny Run? And so I know for me, that's what makes me run, because of that great inspiring vision I have that the world can be changed for the better. And if it's done spiritually, it will actually have a lasting effect. So I think Veda asked me to explain kirtan, what we just did. We just chanted. From the point of view of the Bhagavad Gita, we are, to use the cliche, probably heard this 100 times, eternal souls having a human experience. So even though we are ultimately eternal souls, and I mean, one evidence of this, even from the point of view of, science, is that you simply cannot reduce consciousness to matter. This is called, in philosophy, sort of, reductionism, where that's like, for example, you take, let's say you have 50, let's say you cut a pie into 100 pieces, and you say, I want 50/100ths of the pie. You could just say, I want half the pie. Or, for example, another kind of example, let's say you go to an ordinary traffic light, which is red, yellow, and green, usually red, and very occasionally green. And so it's actually all the same light. It's actually all the same light, but it's coming through different filters. So the idea is that consciousness, when your consciousness comes through a child's body, you experience child's consciousness. When your same consciousness comes through an adolescent body, the consciousness, so to speak, gets filtered by that body. You experience adolescent consciousness, later adult consciousness, white consciousness, black consciousness, Asian consciousness, male or female consciousness. But the idea is that it is simply pure consciousness coming through the filter of the body. And so this sort of materialism or physicalism, there's different names for it in contemporary philosophy. It's the idea that consciousness is really not something special. In fact, one famous philosopher who actually taught at Berkeley for many years, who apparently is, anyway, he said, like, what's the big deal? You know, if your nervous system produces consciousness, it's just like, you know, burping or digesting or breathing. It's just some, but it's obviously not. The experience of being conscious is something, it's not a physical object. This microphone is a physical object. Your body is a physical object. It can be weighed. It can be, you know, chemically tested. But consciousness, how much does consciousness weigh in physical terms? What color is consciousness? And so it's clear if you just think about it, that consciousness is a completely different kind of thing. It's a completely different kind of thing. So reductionism means you try to deny that. But anyway, so I'll just throw in here that science itself, empirical science, does not favor materialism. To say that everything in the world ultimately is just a physical or material object is an interpretation of science. It's not science itself. In fact, if someone says, as some people do say, and I think they're not really thinking very lucidly. Oh, thank you. That's Veda. He'll be my waiter today. And so, consciousness is, here's a little proof. All of us, I mean, none of you are actually Benjamin Button in disguise, are you? So, in other words, you weren't born old and you're getting young. So, all of us can remember that we were babies or we were little children, and then we gradually grew up. So, what you know, more than you know anything else, actually, more even than you know that there's a real world outside your mind, because it could be, as the philosopher Descartes said, what if we are just brains in a laboratory being manipulated to think that there even is such a thing as Atlanta, Georgia? Or that you have a particular body? What if it's all a virtual reality which you've been made to think? There are reasons, by the way, not to believe that. But still, what we ultimately know, more than we know anything else, is that we exist. That is the bedrock fact that no one can deny, because you have a, as you could say in philosophy, privileged access to your own mind. For example, your doctor may know more about your body than you do, or your teacher may know about a subject you're studying than you do, or someone who knows you very well may even remember things about your life that you've forgotten. But the one thing that no one can know as well as you do is what it's like to be you. Maybe someone could...
Scott?
Scott, do you mind?
Hope a brawl doesn't break out. Anyway, so the one thing that you know better than anyone, no one can ever know that as well as you do, is what it's like to be you. The experience of being you. And with that privileged knowledge that you have of what it means to be you, you can understand this simple fact that you are not your body. In fact, it's logically impossible for you to be your body. And here's the proof. All of us have experience of having a little child's body, however far back your memory goes. A child's body, and then let's say an adolescent body, and then maybe an adult body if you... Now the fact is that it's still you. And that's why, you can learn a lot about people's deep understanding by studying their language. So we say, I was a child. I was whatever, a teenager. Or now I'm this or that. So the fact is that you don't have the same body. The Latin word carne, of course, means flesh. And so to reincarnate is just to re-in-flesh. And the skin is like a real speed freak, because every 2 weeks you get new skin. So if you, let's say, romantically touch someone 2.5 weeks ago, and then you see them again, you're actually touching a different skin, which is less romantic, but still it's the fact. So the child's body, the body you had as a child, didn't simply stretch into an adult body. It's gone. The elements of your child's body are, they merge back into the universe. And you have a different body. So basically you can divide your age by 7, and that's how many times you've reincarnated in this life. That's how many times you've reincarnated in this life. And so what Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, just to give you an idea of what Sanskrit sounds like, Krishna, which is, by the way, an Indo-European language, Sanskrit is intimately connected to English. For example, in Sanskrit, if you wanted to say brother, you would say brater. And if you wanted to say mother, you would say mater. So this was discovered in around 1790 by Sir William Jones, one of the early Sanskrit scholars, who was the head of the Royal British Asiatic Society in Calcutta, which was the capital of the British Raj at that time. Actually, it was the East India Trading Company. There's something glorious about capitalism when it owns an entire subcontinent. Just kidding. Anyway, so Sir William Jones made this discovery that Sanskrit was intimately connected with English and all the other Germanic languages like Dutch and German and Scandinavian language, with the Slavic languages, and all that, intimately connected, the same language family. And not only that, he said, and this was kind of a tough pill to swallow for a lot of colonials, people, that it's actually more sophisticated. How many of you have seen My Fair Lady? Anyway, please watch My Fair Lady, it's great. But anyway, the idea of My Fair Lady is that, especially if you look back, say, in England at the time, or even Europe, you're really known by the way you speak. You're really known by, like your level, the way you speak. English sort of determines your social class. And so the British, and frankly, if you look at almost all cultures throughout history, your ability to speak well is considered to be a primary indicator of your cultural level. So here, of course, the British had this justification for colonialism, which hopefully they've gotten over, but it was the idea that white people are ordained by God to rule the world, which is probably very disappointing to non-whites. But anyway, that was their idea, and that they had a higher culture, they had a higher religion, they had to bring their version of Christianity to the world. So when you discover a non-white people who you are ruling, against their will really, but ruling them, and it turns out they speak better than you do, you know, they actually have a far more sophisticated language than you do. And you're supposed to be civilizing them, but in some ways they're smarter than you. And so this discovery of Sanskrit was it was a game changer. And actually many European intellectuals, like the philosopher Schopenhauer in America, Henry David Thoreau. Henry David Thoreau took one book to Walden Pond, which was Bhagavad Gita. And so anyway, what I was getting at is that this knowledge we're presenting, and maybe one more thing I'll throw in, then get back to You're Not Your Body. And that is that this whole Bhakti Yoga, or this great culture that it manifested in asking you to chant Hare Krishna, in asking you to learn Bhagavad Gita, we are not using you as guinea pigs. It's not that I had some kind of spiritual experience and now I realize that I'm the great light of the world, the guru, and I'm going to just kind of, you know, experiment on you. It's not like that. Actually, this civilization or this knowledge has been the foundation of a great civilization that has existed for thousands of years and in many ways achieved heights of civilization other countries didn't. I'll give you a few examples of that. And I'm quoting a Greek diplomat to India around 2,300 years ago, Megasthenes. He was an ambassador to an indigenous empire, the Mauryan Empire at the time. And he wrote a book about India called Indica, about India, which was a bestseller in the ancient world. And he describes certain things. For example, India is the only country that he's seen which has no slavery. Slavery was actually found, without exception, everywhere in the world except India. India was the only country that had a very, how should I put it, robust legal system for animal rights. Hospitals for animals and animal rights. They had rights. It was a country where if you were a foreigner, the government had a special ministry just to protect foreigners from any type of abuse or exploitation. India had another unique cultural feature. And if you read ancient history, if you read actual, like, contemporary Roman historians like Tacitus or Seneca and others who were actually there, like Tacitus was a Roman senator, just, I mean, maybe one generation or half a generation after Jesus. So he was actually in the Roman Senate. He knew all these things. And so India was the only country where, when a battle breaks out, civilians are absolutely safe. Now, if you look at Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar or the great, the Persian, well, the Persians actually were kind of nice because they actually came from India. What? Yeah, anyway, maybe we'll get into that later, but there's some very fascinating facts about Cyrus the Great, the first Persian emperor, who actually spoke a dialect of Sanskrit. The ancient Persian language, called the Avestan language, is actually a dialect of ancient Sanskrit. Okay, I'll do it, since you're from Persia, in your honor. And that is that Cyrus, but in his own language, which was a dialect of ancient Sanskrit, his name was pronounced Kurus, which is a very famous name of kings in India. So Cyrus the Great abolished slavery. He declared complete religious freedom, and actually is called a Messiah. He's called a Messiah in the Old Testament. He was a goy. I mean, he's actually called a Messiah. He's not even Jewish, because when the Babylonians conquered Israel and took the Jews into captivity in Babylonia, he conquered the Babylonians, freed the Jews, gave them the right to go back to Israel, and even gave them a donation, some money, to rebuild the temple the Babylonians had destroyed. So this Cyrus, who's called, because of his enlightened policies, is called a Messiah in the Old Testament, was actually coming from that Vedic culture. But in any case, what Megastani tells us is that in India, there can be a battle going on, a pitched battle, and a farmer who's plowing his field just down the road just doesn't even worry about it. He just plows his field. Why? Because no one's going to attack a civilian. It's like if you go to an NFL game, it's not that some big lineman, jumps into the crowd and starts, tackling you. When I just bought a ticket here. I just wanted to watch the game. And so, if you look at descriptions of warfare in other countries, including the Greco-Roman civilization, other parts of the world, it was just sort of standard tactic that if a city doesn't surrender, they had walled cities until actually around the time when they invented cannons so powerful, they just blew walls down, so they stopped building walls around cities. That was several hundred years ago. But anyway, they had these city walls, and let's say the Romans would encircle them, or some other culture, some other military group, and you're supposed to surrender. Or Alexander, he did this. Now, if you didn't surrender, the people laying siege to your city were very unhappy because they had to go to all this extra trouble. Like, come on, guys, you're going to lose anyway, but no, you want to fight, okay. So they have to bring in the siege engines, and they have to blow down the walls, and they have to climb over the walls and jump down your city, maybe get killed. And it's a big bother. So when they finally conquered your city, because you put them to all that trouble, they would express their displeasure by, killing all the men, raping all the women, and, just general massacre. Because they knew the next city down the road is not going to do that. When they hear that a neighboring city, all the men were slaughtered, the women were all raped, and then sold into slavery, the next city down the block is going to think twice about resisting. So if you read the history of ancient warfare, it was incredibly brutal. Civilians were absolutely not spared. Women were absolutely not spared. And in India, it was completely different. If you were not a voluntary soldier, if you weren't on the battlefield because you chose to be there, no one was going to bother you. And this is also the civilization that brought the world such, hits as yoga. The word yoga is a Sanskrit word, which we still have in English, by the way. There are cognate words in English. There are many words in English from Sanskrit, like, for example, the word to yoke. To link two things together, to yoke things. Or words like conjugal, which means intimate connection. The word yoga comes from the root yuj in Sanskrit, so conjugal, it means to link, to connect. And so yoga is that process by which you connect to the absolute truth that is the source of your existence. So here's one little thing to think about. If someone in this world doesn't know who their parents are, and really had no parent, was just kind of shuttled through the kind of Charles Dickens-esque, foster care system, it leaves a mark. It's not something that someone just, shakes off. It's something that someone has to deal with the rest of their life. Not knowing who their parents were, not having any mother, father that really loved you and cared about you. And so imagine if you don't know as an eternal soul who the source of your existence is. You actually don't know where you've come from. Or you don't know why you were even born at all. So all this was handled, I think, in a very extraordinary way in this great Vedic culture. And one more thing I'll mention. Actually, I brought this out in the course. I gave it twice at the University of Florida. I taught the history of religion in India. And maybe I'll throw this in. And then I'm actually going to speak on what you said about what we do here. I'm just waiting because when your deposit comes through, I get a little sound on my phone, and I haven't heard that yet. But they're actually We're kidding. There are three reasons why I think it's very safe to say that India is the best place in the world to study the variety of human religion. The reasons are that, number one, India was by far, until the colonial system got kind of really nasty, India was by far the richest country in the world. In fact, scholars, this is like mainstream academic stuff. This is not like on my special conspiracy website. This is just very much mainstream academics that up until, maybe 400 years ago or something, India had over half the wealth of the world in the way that the world calculated wealth in terms of, not stocks and bonds, but things like jewels and gold and agricultural products, textiles, just everything people wanted. And also, if you look at a map, just, in your browser, if you just type in map of Indian rivers, India has by far the best natural irrigation system in the world. India, because you have the highest mountains and you get a lot of snow up there, so you have these just incredible amount of water coming down. And of course, South India has its own rivers, the Krishna, the Kaveri, and Narmada, and all these rivers. And so it has fertile land. India has every conceivable climate, it has everything from dense tropical jungles to deserts. I'll just throw this in. I watched this documentary on the Thar Desert. It's the Great Desert of Rajasthan, which is sort of in northwest India. And scholars, scientists point out that of all the deserts in the world, the big ones, of all the deserts in the world, the Thar Desert, this one in India and Rajasthan, has by far the greatest biodiversity. It has the greatest variety of of living things, of animals, and the reason the scientists give for that is because of the special culture in India, because people respected all life. People respected all life forms, and the result was you get the most biodiverse desert in the world. But in any case, so you have this big country, the subcontinent. You have this super natural irrigation system. You have all kinds of climates, fertile land. Result, a lot of people lived in India. Of course, the population was much less back then, but India was always able to support prosperously a large population. Whereas, for example, if you go to Saudi Arabia, it's the opposite, for obvious natural conditions. So you have a big population. There's another fact, and that is India, from the earliest records available, always had freedom of religion. There was always, in the Rig Veda, there's one very famous verse that Ekang Sat Bahudha, that even though there's one ultimate truth, different thinkers, different sages invoke that truth by different names. And so India always had religion. It had a lot of people. It had religious freedom. And we find historically that people in India were always very, very interested in spiritual things and in religion. So when you have land that supports a lot of people, and you have a people that's very interested in spiritual and religious things, and they're free to pursue it any way they like. For example, something which would be absolutely inconceivable in the West or Middle East. And that is, in India, you had this, the Vedas, these sacred texts. Veda means knowledge. And by the way, the word Veda, we still have words from, the root for the word is vid, or wit, as they pronounce it in West India. And from that root, vid, you get words in English like wisdom. You get the Latin root vedere, which means to see. You get words like vision, video. It just goes on and on and on. All that is from the word Veda, or the root wit, from which you get the word Veda. So, anyway, they had this free marketplace of ideas. And here's the point I wanted to make. Every conceivable religion, in fact, for example, India is the only country in the world where the Jewish people were never persecuted. India is the only country in the world where the Jewish people were never persecuted. When the Muslims conquered Persia and began to persecute the Zoroastrians, where did they go where they knew they would be safe and have complete freedom to practice their religion? They went to India. And that's the Parsi community in India. They're sort of centered in Mumbai. They went there for religious freedom. So, and here's the punchline here, that in this great country, this culture area, where you have this extraordinary interest in spirituality and religion, they invented yoga. They were the first to meditate. You find every conceivable kind of religion. They welcomed every religion of the world to come and peacefully practice whatever they do. And there were debates. I mean, it's not like they were just kind of, dull. They did care about the truth. In fact, there's a great Vedic sage called Satyakama, which means truth lover. Anyway, they debated because they didn't kill each other, because they respected each other, because they saw God in other traditions, even ones that came from outside the country. Therefore, it was safe to argue about it, because everyone knew this is not going to lead to a holy war. In fact, holy wars are something that kind of were invented by Middle Eastern religions. I mean, don't kill the messenger. For example, if you look at the Greeks and Romans, the Romans, they never met a war they didn't like. Just to tell you how the Roman, their mentality, their sort of creation myth, like where do the Romans come from? Their understanding was that their father was the god of war, Mars, and he begot the first Romans, the god of war, in a she-wolf. So this is they're very serious about these things. They were. But the interesting thing is that they didn't fight religious wars. They weren't trying to bring Jupiter to, ignorant people who were going to hell because they didn't know about Jupiter, which, by the way, is a Sanskrit word. Because in Sanskrit, Jew means heaven. It's a root from which you get words like Deva, Divya, divine in English. And Peter, that you should recognize, means father. That's where we get paternal. And so Jew Peter means the father of heaven, Sanskrit word. Anyway, so the Romans fought for, more traditional objectives like lust, greed, lust for power, greed for territory, and so on. But they weren't religious wars. In fact, the Romans and Greeks had what is called, just trying to tell you what the world was like. They had something in Greece, they had the Interpretatio Graeca, which means the Greek interpretation. And then the Romans adopted it as the Interpretatio Romanum. What that meant was that they accepted there's only one truth. If there's a supreme God, there's one supreme God for everyone. But different people in different countries use different names. And they may have different ways of talking about it, and different stories, and so on. But we are all worshiping the same. One huge advocate of religious syncretism, which means that let's all, respect each other and recognize we're all worshiping the same God, was maybe not your favorite spiritualist, but Alexander the Great. That's why Alexander, young guy, That's why he married an Asian princess. That's why he insisted that all of his generals marry Asian girls. Why? He wanted to unite the world because he believed we're all worshiping the same thing. And so the idea that, if I can make a distinction here for you, what you find historically is two kinds of monotheism. Monotheism is that there's only one God, which philosophically, that's what it comes to. If someone's a polytheist, I won't go into it now, but it turned out to be bad philosophy for various reasons. So there are basically two kinds of monotheism. Tribal monotheism, my God can beat up your God, literally. Because, everyone brings banners with their God into battle, and if my God beats up your God, we win the war. You get this tribal monotheism, like this is the only way. And if you don't believe what we believe, we're going to do very bad things to you. But there's another kind of monotheism, which is philosophical monotheism. And in the Greco-Roman world and in India, you find philosophical, pretty aggressive for a so-called spiritualist, huh? That there's, in the Greco-Roman world, and by the way, the Greco-Roman world is part of the Indian world. Because the language family is called Indo-European languages. And the languages are so intimately connected that every scholar agrees there was an Indo-European civilization. So what you find in India, what you found in the ancient classical world is philosophical monotheism. You can accept there's one God. You can even believe that you have the best information about that one God, but you understand that other people are worshiping the same God and they're not going to hell unless they kill and mutilate innocent people. But they're certainly not going to go to hell just because they call God a different name or because they worship a different way. So this understanding was actually destroyed by the rise of, Middle Eastern religions in Europe. So anyway, so what we're trying to bring you really, and chanting Hare Krishna, we'll get to that now, or Veda definitely won't pay me. But, right? So what we're trying to bring you is not just one nice New Age thing and here's something you can think about. We're trying to bring you this great time-tested civilization which for thousands of years proved to provide a powerful foundation for civilized, generous, merciful, spiritual societies. And here's what I really wanted to get to. If you study this history, because I taught it, I had to teach thousands of years of Indian history at the University of Florida. I didn't have to do it, actually. I wanted to do it. So what you find is in this completely free, open marketplace where, say, the rise of Buddhism. I mean, can you imagine in Europe in the Middle Ages or even in the Renaissance period? Can you imagine going into Europe and preaching that actually Christianity is not really where it's at and there's a higher religion? The only question would be whether you survived 45 seconds, or maybe if you could run really fast, maybe 2 minutes. And they wouldn't even kill you, because that would be, that would be setting a bad example. They would have to make you suffer a lot first. So with the rise of Buddhism, the Buddhists, who were also in India, they basically rejected the sacred scriptures, like the Bible of India, the Vedas. And they said, it's false, you shouldn't follow this. What happened to them? Nothing. People just came to debate them. They just had debates about it. It never occurred to anyone that you should kill a Buddhist because they're basically blaspheming, the sacred texts here, our religion. And they did have debates. And what's interesting, and I'll get to this now, is that in the open marketplace of ideas, what happened to Buddhism in the country of its origin? It took to Krishna. And this is a point I wanted to make. If you look at if you look at India, the history in this open, free marketplace of ideas with many intelligent people, and there's a lot of smart people in India. We won't tick off all the people from India that are heads of major corporations in America and all that. But the point is, there are a lot of very bright people, and there always have been. I mean, they invented zero. You can't do computation in the modern sense without zero, and they invented it. So, I mean, Aryabhatta, he's one of my personal, honk if you love Aryabhatta. He lived about 1,500 years ago, 1,600 years ago. He has, different celestial bodies named after him. And he was one of the co-founders of trigonometry. So the words we use, sine, cosine, right? I mean, that was your favorite class in high school, right? Trigonometry. No. So all those terms in trigonometry actually come from Sanskrit. Roman numerals, Arabic numerals, like the way we write numbers, they're actually Sanskrit numerals. But they came to Europe through the Arab countries. We call them Arab numerals. They're actually Indian numerals. So in that free marketplace where you could have any religion you want, who was the big winner? Freely, openly, no coercion, no killing, just because it attracted more people and convinced more people? Krishna. Bhakti Yoga. After 1,000 years, or actually 2,000 years of a completely free society, everyone free to go into the town square and, sell your wares in terms of religion, and the big winner was Krishna and Bhagavad Gita. And therefore you find in India that the most important, the most powerful spiritual texts which have completely shaped Indian civilization, like Mahabharata. Maha, by the way, we have in English, which means great. We just have it by way of the Latin magna. Like Magna Carta, magnificent, magnified. In Latin, magnificat means I glorify. So if you're Catholic, Magnificat, anima mea domino. Anyway, it's really beautiful. I recommend Vivaldi's version. But anyway, so you have this Mahabharata in which the ultimate hero is Krishna. You have the Ramayana, the other great sacred text which has basically shaped Indian civilization for thousands of years. The Ramayana's about Krishna in his form as Rama. It's just another avatar. Not James Cameron. So, actually the word avatar, in case you're interested, ava is a prefix in Sanskrit, a prefix which means downward. And tara means to cross. So when a great personality crosses down from the spiritual realm into our material world, that crossing down is called avatara. Actually from the same root, those of you who know Indian languages, from the same root, tara, like for example, tara means a raft also. The word tara means a raft in Sanskrit, where you cross. And a holy place is called a tirtha. The word everyone from India knows, a tirtha. Why? Because what is a tirtha? It means a holy place. What is a tirtha? It's a place where an avatar came, or some enlightened soul came, opening a channel to the higher realm, and then you go there, and as they cross down, you can cross up. They open this portal, this channel, and by going to that holy place, you can go through that channel, you can actually go to the spiritual realm. That's why from the same root, you have avatara and tirtha. So Krishna was a big winner. He basically won India's Got Talent. India's Got Spiritual Talent. And, he got that, what do they call it? The golden buzzer or something. So Buddha was recognized as an avatar of Krishna, of Vishnu. And everyone was happy. So kirtan, maybe just a word on kirtan. You ready? What's that? Okay, Kirtana, it's actually The Sanskrit word is kirtanam, which is sort of shortened in modern Indic languages to kirtan. And it means to glorify, to praise, and basically that's what you do when you're not envious. For example, if you're in a relationship, and you don't take more pleasure in seeing your partner glorified or successful than in your own success, you need help. Like parents, parents, if they are good parents, they love their children more practically than themselves, and they will sacrifice whatever they have to sacrifice for the good of their children. So just like parents are proud of their children, or I'm proud of my brothers because they were very successful back in LA, or that's what you do when you really love someone. You want to praise them. You want to tell other people, yeah, he or she did this and did that. That gives you more happiness than praising yourself. And so ultimately, when you realize there is a supreme person, in Sanskrit, Parama Purusha. So when you realize there's a supreme person, you glorify God not because you don't want to burn in a lake of fire, or because you have to, otherwise the community, think you're, off. You do it out of love. God is infinitely attractive. God brings us to him, her, they. Krishna, God we're not going to fight over the pronouns, right? So God attracts us by beauty, by love. Not by coercion, not by threats, not by bullying. And so, can I mention one more thing? Okay. I just want to, get Socrates into this. There's a famous Socratic dialogue called the Euthyphro. Basically, Euthyphro was this fatuous hypocrite. He was this guy who thought he was very righteous, but he was actually doing bad things. And so Socrates asked him a very powerful question. He said, are some actions, like let's say in any scripture it says, do this, don't do that. So are these actions good just because the gods, or God likes them? Like, God is whimsical, or the gods are whimsical. You have to do this. You have to follow these rules because God just wants people to do that. Or is it that certain actions are good? Is it that the gods, or God, they love certain actions because those actions are intrinsically good? To surrender to God doesn't mean you just come under the thumb of some whimsical deity who just bullies you. You got to do this, you can't do that. No. It's that if you have good parents and they say, like, don't eat this food because you're going to get very sick, or don't take addictive drugs, or don't, drive on suburban streets at 80 miles an hour. I wish my mother had told me that. But anyway, if you have good parents, they're telling you things because it's objective. Because you really will have problems if you don't follow these things. So to serve God is not to just give up your own integrity and do what someone else wants just because they're stronger than you. It's not some kind of divine law of the jungle. It's actually loving someone that loves you infinitely and that actually is very bright. So anyway, kirtan. We glorify because we open our hearts. We give up our envy. I don't have to be the life of the party. I can let someone else who's infinitely greater than me be the life of the party. And I feel the greatest pleasure telling other people about someone who's much better than me. So if you follow me, feel sorry for you. But if you follow the person that I'm following, not because I'm following it, God or Krishna, so that's why we do kirtan. That's how you escape your ego. All of our suffering is due to this false ego, self-centeredness, identifying with the body instead of the soul. So every time the body suffers, which it does on a fairly regular basis, you suffer. So it's liberating. It's just like if you're sick and you give yourself to the instructions of a really good doctor, that frees you. You're not losing your freedom by following these instructions. You're becoming liberated from your disease. So by glorifying Krishna, by singing these names, by the way, no gender issues. Hare refers to the female aspect of the absolute truth. Hare. Krishna is the male aspect, which means that there's true love even in the spiritual world. I mean, wouldn't it be really a bummer if you go to heaven and like there's no romance? Or people don't fall in love? I mean, you might want your money back. So romantic love comes from the absolute truth. In the absolute truth, there's Radha Krishna, Sita Ram, Lakshmi Narayan, and so on. So there's actually the infinite romantic love is found in the absolute truth. And as souls, we also have a right to pure romantic love, but in spiritual consciousness. So that's Kirtan. You want to sing? Who wants to sing? Oh, I wrote a song. Veda wants me to sing it, so I'll do it. I wrote this song about how many years ago? More. Anyway, more than 20, 25 years ago. I was just a young guy. I was a leader in the Hare Krishna movement at a young age. And I was in Vrindavan, the land of Krishna. And in India, they have these cots where it's kind of like a couch and a bed. You know, you just sit on it, nice cotton mattress. And so I was sitting there with my harmonium. And I took a great devotional song that was written several hundred years ago. And I just tried to do a translation of it into English, because I wanted people to understand it. And so this is that song. Last time I sang this was actually in the Bahamas at that yoga Paradise Island. Yeah. And it was amazing because everyone kind of went crazy. They were singing and dancing. You know, they gave out sheets with it, so it was really nice. So this is a song. I hope you can understand the words. But it's just a translation of a Bengali song. Gauranga Bolite Habe Pulaka Sharir, and so on. Me. So, when I get through this. Ready, maestro? Ready, maestro? When I sing the holy name of Gauranga, I will feel that love is trembling in my body. Then I will be free. How happy I will be, and I'll sing Hari Hari, and love I'll realize. Hari Hari, tears falling from my eyes, like rain falls from the sky. When will I see that in this world all things must pass? Life's like a dream. It all seems real, but it won't last. but the spirit can be free to enjoy eternally if we sing Hari Hari, and love will realize. Hari Hari, tears falling from our eyes like rain falls from the sky. When will I see the holy land they call Vrindavan? Boys and girls play with the Lord in Vrindavan, forever young and free. How happy they must be, and they sing Hari Hari, and love they've realized. Hari Hari, tears falling from their eyes like rain falls from the sky. Hari Hari. Hare Krishna. You sing.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, one more time. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Everybody, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One more time. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Go for it. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. One more time. Hare Hare. I can't hear you. Girls only, girls only. Boys. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. A little louder, girls. Girls. Boys. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Everybody together. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Can't hear you. One more time. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Little faster. Make some noise. Again. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Again, one more time. Faster, faster. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One more time. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare test your mystical yogic powers. See if you can raise both your hands. See if you can touch the ceiling from wherever you are seated or standing up. And see how loud we can make this beautiful sound vibration synchronize with your heart. After me. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Let me hear you guys. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. From your heart, deep down. Rama Rama. One last time, deep down from your heart. Ready? Together. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Thank you all very much. We just have a quick protection prayer. Just really for your protecting your heart and your mind from any intrusions. So really quick. Namaste Narasimhaya, Namaste Narasimhaya, Praladadadayine, Hiranyakashipurvakshaha, Shrilatankanakalaye, O Nrsimha Parato Nrsimha, Yato Yato Yamitato Nrsimha, Hare Nrsimha, Hridaye Nrsimha, Nrsimha Madhum Sharanam Prapayye, Avakara Kamala Hare Natha, Adhuta Singha, Dalita Hiranyakashipu, Tanovinga, Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Nrsimha Dev, Nrsimha Dev, Nrsimha Dev, Jaya Nrsimha Dev. Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj. Thank you all very much. Let's give a big round of applause for His Holiness H.D. Goswami for gracing us with his presence. Come on guys, if I was invited here with that clap, I would have... much. We're just going to move things around. Please be seated. We're going to feed you some beautiful, delicious, luxurious dinner. It'll soothe your belly.